Hey there, I'm Melissa, and this is Behind the Trend. Short stories, big insights. All right, so here's something I never thought I'd say out loud. Donald Trump has just won the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah, take a second to let that sink in. The same man who built his image on bold talk, sharp lines, and a constant tug of war with the world, now has one of the planet's highest honors for peace. It's real, it's official, and it's honestly strange. But as odd as it sounds, it's also deeply telling about the world we're living in right now. Let's unpack what happened. And maybe, by the end, you'll see why some are calling this the saddest peace prize ever given. It was a quiet morning in Oslo. Reporters waiting in the Nobel Hall, cameras ready, pens tapping, and then the announcement came. The Nobel Peace Prize for this year is awarded to Donald J. Trump for his role in advancing ceasefire negotiations and promoting global de-escalation. At first, silence. Then a low ripple of gasps and murmurs across the room. Because this was a twist no one saw coming. Moments later, Trump appeared before the press, wearing his usual dark suit and red tie, calm, collected, maybe even proud. He smiled and said, "It's a tremendous honor. Peace is tough, but I've always said it begins with strength." And you know what? That line, "Peace begins with strength," set the tone for the entire day. So, let's back up a bit. After leaving office, Trump didn't exactly disappear. He shifted gears, quietly at first, focusing on global issues where chaos had become routine. When fighting reignited between Ukraine and Russia in 2025, Trump offered himself as a mediator. Most world leaders rolled their eyes. Many thought it was just another headline grab. But slowly, behind the scenes, he started working the phones, talking to European diplomats, pushing both sides toward a fragile truce. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't perfect, but it worked, even if just for a while. Humanitarian corridors opened, the gunfire slowed, and for the first time in years, both sides talked without walking away. So, when the Nobel Committee looked at that, they saw something worth recognizing. Still, there's an uncomfortable irony here, because Trump didn't suddenly become a global peacemaker overnight. He's being honored in a way for calming fires he once fanned. Here's where things get complicated. This is a man whose political brand was built on confrontation, on being loud, defiant, and, well, unapologetically Trump. And now the world is handing him a medal for peace. It's almost poetic, right? The fighter gets the prize for putting down his gloves. Even some former Nobel winners weren't happy about it. One European diplomat said, "It feels like a peace prize for surviving chaos, not creating peace." Another added, "Maybe this isn't really about Trump. Maybe it's about the world being exhausted. We'll take peace from anyone who can bring it, even him." And that's where the sadness comes in, because maybe, just maybe, this award says more about our desperation for calm than it does about Trump's diplomacy. Now, as you'd expect, the internet went wild. Within hours, hashtags like Nobel Trump and Irony Award were trending. His supporters cheered, saying, "He did what others only talked about." Critics called it a mockery of the award, comparing it to giving a vegan award to a butcher. And of course, late-night shows couldn't resist. One host joked, he got the Peace Prize because arguing with him was worse than peace itself. But here's the twist. Despite all the noise, Trump's approval ratings went up, a few points higher among independents, because even people who don't like him, for a moment, paused and thought, well, at least someone's trying. And maybe that pause, that second of reflection, is part of what this whole thing is about. You know, the Nobel Peace Prize isn't really about perfection, it's about hope. It's about saying, we see an effort, we see the start of something better. So maybe this award isn't celebrating who Trump has been, but who he could be. One analyst called it a dare, not a reward, a dare to keep choosing dialogue over division, words instead of weapons. And that idea, that someone so associated with conflict is now tied to peace, that's a test. For him, and honestly, for us too. Can people change? Can they surprise us? Can the same person who thrived on chaos become a symbol of calm? Maybe that's the story behind the story. Meanwhile, the world around this moment is still deeply unstable. Conflicts keep flaring, old rivalries haven't gone anywhere, and global trust feels thinner than ever. So when the Nobel Committee handed Trump this medal, it almost felt like a message to everyone. We'll take peace, even if it comes from an imperfect messenger. That's hard to swallow for a lot of people, because when you think of the Peace Prize, you think of Mandela, Malala, people who sacrificed, who suffered, who inspired. Trump doesn't exactly fit that image, but that's why this moment hits differently, because peace doesn't always come wrapped in grace. Sometimes it arrives wearing a red tie and a reputation. Meanwhile, the world around this moment is still deeply unstable. Conflicts keep flaring, old rivalries haven't gone anywhere, and global trust feels thinner than ever. So when the Nobel Committee handed Trump this medal, it almost felt like a message to everyone. We'll take peace, even if it comes from an imperfect messenger. That's hard to swallow for a lot of people, because when you think of the Peace Prize, you think of Mandela, Malala, people who sacrificed, who suffered, who inspired. Trump doesn't exactly fit that image, but that's why this moment hits differently, because peace doesn't always come wrapped in grace. Sometimes it arrives wearing a red tie and a reputation. All right, let's get real for a second. This story, it's not just about Donald Trump. It's about us. It's about a world that's exhausted by conflict, about people craving stability so badly, they'll take it wherever they can find it. Maybe that's what this prize represents. Not admiration, but relief. A collective sigh that says, thank God someone's doing something. And that's why it's both ironic and heartbreaking. Because peace shouldn't feel this rare. It shouldn't feel like something we have to compromise on. But right now, it does. When history looks back at this day, it'll be hard to categorize. Was it a turning point? A joke? A statement? Maybe all three. But one thing's certain, this moment proves that peace doesn't always wear a halo. Sometimes it shows up wrapped in contradiction. Maybe that's the real message here, that peace isn't clean or easy. It's messy, human, imperfect. And if this award reminds even one person that change is possible, then maybe, just maybe, it did its job. So, what do you think? Does this Nobel mean redemption or irony? Maybe it's a bit of both. Either way, it's a reminder that peace doesn't belong to saints. Sometimes it starts with the least likely person in the room. I'm Melissa, and this is Behind the Trend, short stories, big insights. Thanks for joining me tonight. Stay curious, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the story behind the headline tells us more about us than about them. Good night.